Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I am the leader of the Preston Lib Dems. We've been planning on doing a news episode pretty much since the new year, but then every half an hour, a new news story comes out about this government and it will be quickly out of date. So we realised we were recording this on Monday, and the Sue Gray report has just gone to Downing Street. But given that they're probably going to redact half of it anyway, and then the Met Police will cover it up, all of which we will get to in this episode, we thought, why not invite some of the gang in and we'll do a kind of a sum up of the news that has been happening, where we think the party lies, where not just our party, but Labour and the Tories. So to join me, we have obviously two absolute stalwarts of the podcast. Join us. He's had a bit of a sabbatical. He's been away a while. He hasn't been getting a tan from what we look like. He certainly hasn't been growing his hair. So welcome to the podcast, leader of the Lib Dems in Liverpool, Richard Kemp. Welcome back, Richard.
Hi, glad to be back.
We had so many calls, so much fan mail demanding your return, Richard. It was breaking the letterbox. That's what it was.
I was described as an eminence grise the other day at a meeting. I thought that sounds quite posh. So I asked the bloke what it means. He says stupid old git. So there you are.
And of course, joining us from Barnsley is the leader of the Barnsley Lib Dems, Hannah Kitchen. Hello, Hannah.
Hello. Very pleased to be back on with Richard, of course. It should be an entertaining hour.
Yes. So you say we've got an hour. So I kind of, when I was doing it, and for people that don't listen and watch the podcast very often, we kind of have our own WhatsApp group where we decide, okay, what we're going to talk about. And I came up with a list of things. Okay, what could we possibly talk about? And there is literally a dozen things we could go with. So should we start off with the big story pretty much since New Year, which has been Partygate, the parties, and how that's been. Richard, do you want to kick this off? Like I said, we've just got report that Sue Gray has given the report to 10 Downing Street. I suppose your initial impression is, do you think we are going to learn anything at all new, or do you think it's just going to be a wait and see what happens, or what Ed Davey says, nothing's going to come out probably?
Well, I think the key question is Boris Johnson going to learn anything from this? Because I'm sure lots of other people will, but I doubt very much that he will. I think it's all got very confused with the Sue Gray report and the Metropolitan Police report. I don't necessarily see why they conflict, because this isn't a case of something going to the jury, though I could see evidence being altered if people see a particular report. I think the Tories are greatly underestimating the absolute anger of people about this issue. They think that they can make it go away. We've had a whole series of announcements, some of them barking mad, and a few more this week. But underlying all that, even if people like some of those announcements, most people know they're just being brought forward without proper thought, without a full examination of them, just to try and deflect attention. And my view is that it isn't going to work.
Hannah, is it deflecting attention?
I mean, the Prime Minister and the government are doing absolutely everything they can, aren't they, to deflect attention away from this. It's it's really the most astonishing situation that we face here. In that, we have a Prime Minister who we know lies, who we know has little respect for even the rule of law, to be honest. And that's what we're seeing every single day. There's more evidence coming out that he's broken his own guidelines, willfully broken his own guidelines. I wouldn't say I feel sorry for them, but some of these ministers who are being wheeled out day after day, to try and defend him. What was it last week? Oh, he was ambushed by a cake.
That's been happening to me for a very long time.
Yeah, we'd all love to be ambushed by cake, wouldn't we? So and deflecting news stories. Goodness knows as well what they're up to in the background while people aren't concentrating. Usually when there's a big scandal, the Tories try and shove all sorts of horrific stuff through Parliament while everyone's distracted. And it's just, it's unprecedented, really, isn't it? This level of sleaze and scandal would have brought any form of government, any form of Prime Minister to their knees. I've got a constituent who's a supporter of mine, but a long-standing Tory member, was actually a staffer for Margaret Thatcher back in the day. So he's, he knows all about the inner workings of Downing Street, and he rang me up and he just said, this would not have happened under Margaret. This would never have happened. And just that complete lack of principles, integrity, and he's dragging the Met Police into it as well. I mean, I'm rambling a little bit now, but it just all links together, doesn't it? I think the situation with the Met is truly appalling, truly appalling. As a general rule, I'm of the view that, I respect the police, I respect the police forces, I respect our police services, because I think they work incredibly hard. I think they're, essential to functioning law and order in our democracy. But the Met Police are continuously undermining that. There've been a number of issues which we don't need to go into. But on the flip side of that is, what threats are the government making to the Met Police if they don't pursue this course of action? We heard last week MPs are being told, if you don't toe the line, all your constituency funding will get pulled. What of the Met? I suspect the Met Police are under a similar kind of a cloud hanging over them. It's not an excuse.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Praetor Rains. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Praetor Rains have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Praetor Rains are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, Lib Dem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Praetor Rains website at praetorrains.co.uk/liberal-democrats. Richard, I'm never one to kind of believe in conspiracies. I always think they're kind of the last desperate embers of a failing argument. But there is you see what's happening with the Met Police. And like I said, Hannah, we're not going to talk about the Sarah Everard case or anything like that, where they've actually destroyed their credibility, in my view. Because like I said, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but the idea that what conflict is possibly happening? Why can't a civil servant continue out her report, and how does that affect the Met Police? It does feel like this is a very cosy relationship that is looking after each other. And I think the fact the Met Police is different from other police organisations, because it's the only one that actually has a direct line manager, so to speak, as in the Home Secretary, that it reports to. So it feels odd. And I think you're right, Richard, in what you were saying about the parties. They don't get the anger and they're trying everything possible to get out of it. But I was on BBC Radio Lancashire and just saying, it's not actually about cake. It's not about cake. It's not about wine. It's not about cheese. It's about actually having some integrity in the people that are supposed to rule our country. We still have hundreds of people dying a day from COVID. We have potential war in Eastern Europe, and we have massive economic shockwaves about to hit. We need to be able to think that actually the people at the top of government are thinking about the country and not saving their own skin. And I don't believe that Boris Johnson's doing that. I think he is totally, what is it, Save Big Dog or something like that is his new slogan from the Tories. It just feels rotten. And Hannah's right. Can you imagine any other Prime Minister at all not resigning under these things? And what does that say, Richard? Does that say our politics has changed? Have we got... People said the same thing about Trump. This is unprecedented. Trump must go. Are we now in that kind of truth doesn't matter, integrity doesn't matter politics?
I think there was a question about 5 minutes ago, and I think we should explain to our listeners that we do therapy while we're on this podcast. I don't actually think it's a conspiracy between the Met and the Cabinet Office or the Prime Minister. I think the way I would criticise the Met is where were they 3 weeks ago rather than where they are now. They should have been in there. They failed, but it wasn't the Met, it was the police force failed with Cummings and his trip to Barnard Castle in the northeast. The Met said they couldn't deal with it. They didn't have enough evidence. Well, we expect police to go and get evidence so that they can take action.
And there were police on the doors at Downing Street as they were wheeling in suitcases of beer. Or it won't be beer, will it?
And it must have clinked going past the gate, surely. So I don't buy it, but I don't think there is a conspiracy there. But what I think that the people of this country should be talking about is the fact that that place, that 10 Downing Street, 11 Downing Street, is supposed to be the nerve centre of the country. It's supposed to be full of people who have only one intent, and that is to put the people of the United Kingdom front and centre in all their actions, in all their ideas. And what we've got is apparently a bunch of boozy kids, which aren't being properly supervised by the Prime Minister, making huge decisions on our behalf. And I've always railed against two things for us, a Northerner. We're run by politicians in Westminster and we're run by civil servants in Whitehall. None of them, or very few of them, have a grip with reality, and none of them are at all reflective of life in Preston, Barnsley, or Liverpool.
Absolutely. So I'm now going to make my statement very short here before I go to Hannah. I've had my one rant, but Hannah, you will mention about the blackmail kind of claims from William Ragg, who, if anyone hasn't seen our episode with Lisa Smart, who will be taking on William Ragg in Hazel Grove, but is that just normal business, the whole idea? I mean, it all kind of culminated in Christian Wakeford defecting as well, which no doubt we'll get onto. But is that normal politics? Do this or you face the wrath of the whips?
I think to some extent it is, and it always has been. I think, without a doubt, for example, Barnsley did a lot better under the Tony Blair government. Labour MPs, Labour Authority, Labour government. I think what has changed, and there's whips as well. You do need to keep your group in line. That goes for any political group. Parish councils, right through to the Lords. You do need your group to be in line and on message. I think
from three leaders here, we should just point out.
I think what has changed is how blatant it's become. So we saw the way the Tories, to some extent, the way the Tories campaigned in the 2019 general election. So we saw that here, this Penston Stocksbridge, which is my constituency where I live and where I stood, went from Labour to Tory. Angela Smith's old seat went from Labour to Tory at 2019. And there was certainly an element of the Tory candidate having photographs with the Transport Secretary and having the Home Secretary come and, if I'm your MP, together with the government, I will work on tackling rural crime and improving your transport. So there's that kind of leverage, which is okay. We would all do a little bit of that. That's fine. And then what we saw in the by-elections we've had since then, so Batley and Spen was where I particularly saw it, because that's where I spent a fair bit of time, was a really blatant, if you vote Conservative, we will bring investment and sweeties and good things into Batley and Spen. With the flip message of that being, if you vote Labour, you can forget any investment.
Rishi Sunak put a letter out in his name in North Shropshire saying that, and I think maybe CNA as well, saying the exact same thing.
I suspect we saw similar things in Hartlepool as well. I have to say, we really stood a paper candidate there. But I suspect with that having been a Labour Tory battle, we saw the same. So this really blatant pork barrelling, and we know it goes on. I think it goes on in America even more than it does here. And I think it works the other way around as well. I think, to some extent, representatives will say to the whips and the government, well, all right, I'll come online on this, but there's a thing that I want. So yeah, I think it's always happened. I think it is absolutely blatant now. And I also think it's punishing. So the, places like Barnsley proper, the Barnsley, Central and Barnsley East constituencies, Barnsley has seen absolutely no levelling up funding, absolutely not a single penny. And even in Miriam's constituency, Penston Stocksbridge, it's a split Barnsley-Sheffield constituency. All the money and investment she's pummeling into Stocksbridge, which is on the Sheffield side of the border. Part of that, I think, is a bit of political game playing, but there's no money for Barnsley whatsoever. And that, to me, that feels like a punishment, which, I mean, to me, it just doesn't make sense. Surely, as a government, what you want to do is you want to switch people to your vote. So you say, well, if we invest in the North as a whole, then the North as a whole might consider voting for us. If we only, it doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, it's no surprise, John, is it? But it's blatant now.
But that might segue us into a consideration of Brexit, which is really becoming apparent this time. One of the good things about the EU, and there were many, but this is a particular one, is when they gave or didn't give money, it was against objective criteria about things like unemployment, education levels, skill levels, etc. So if you declared an objective 1, 2, or whatever area, or rural, I can't think what the rural version is, but that was on hard facts. And if you're wealthy, you didn't get it. And if you're poor, you did, because that's how you level up. And there is no objectiveness about this. And for that matter, there wasn't about the Labour Party, because the trouble is we rely on all this being fair. Well, fair is as fair thinks. If you're a very rich person, you think it's fair to keep more money. If you're not, you think it's fair to get more money. So that's a subjective thing. So I want to do this on statistics, which can be verified. And then we say, this is the area that needs the money.
So, I mean, this is all about reassuring the Tory base. I mean, you've talked about Brexit. That's obviously another issue. They're trying to pick any fight they can, the Tories, to think, let's move the news agenda on. But actually, how are they doing it, keeping that base? So obviously, we look at polls now. Tories have dropped significantly in poll, almost exactly matching Boris Johnson's popularity as well. That has dropped significantly as well. But interestingly enough, if you dig into those polls, it's still a lot of Tory votes going, don't know, rather than straight swapping, thinking Keir Starmer is going to be the next Prime Minister, which also then leads to, if you look at previous elections, those don't knows, and there was a lot of that in 2015 about Ed Miliband and stuff like that. And in the end, he didn't get that extra vote. He didn't bridge that gap. So are the Tories in a good place? Are we at risk of thinking they are at risk more than we think, actually, that the Tories? Richard, I'll come to you. The Tory party, they're not getting the anger, but is their view that if we just hold out, we will get through this and Johnson will get through this?
Well, I hope they carry on thinking that, because I think that's entirely wrong. Always a little hard for me to judge, of course, because there is effectively no Tory party in this area. But what I'm picking up nationally is that there is an underlying anger. And there comes a time, and it happened when we control the council, it happened under the Blair government, where after 10, 12, 13 years, probably people are having enough of you and are more likely to pick up on faults anyway. So I think that there is no way back for the Tories. But that, of course, then says, what's the opportunity for us, which I'm sure you do want us to address. And again, it isn't an opportunity for me in Liverpool, but there are large parts of the country where we have our candidates in place who must be sharpening their rhetorical knives to get out on those streets, because I think we can take the Tories on in 20, 30, 40 constituencies. And we will play, the Tories won't be brought down unless the Liberal Democrats do very well at the next general election.
Yeah, and before I bring Hannah in to talk about kind of perception, just to build on that really, on where both Labour and the Tories are, we should just point out that, following from Richard just said, don't wait for the Tories to collapse. Get out there and give them a push to collapse. And you've got, in May, you've got local elections pretty much across the country. There are some areas that don't, but you're not too far away from people that do. You have a real opportunity now to capitalise on what the situation. Labour has a leader that doesn't inspire, but also isn't threatening, and the Tories are in a little bit of a melt. You need to capitalise on this time, because if you leave it before the general election, it's too late. Hannah?
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting you're saying about how a lot of Tories are going down as don't knows. And I think that what they're doing is they're I think they, as much as us, are biding their time and waiting to see how this current crisis pans out. And for some of them that don't know, will be conditional on whether they get rid of Johnson. So they're thinking, well, if there was a general election tomorrow, I wouldn't be voting for this bunch of clowns. However, if Johnson is replaced, which, and I've always said, the Tories will not fight another election with Boris Johnson as leader, and I maintain that. I'm not expecting him to go this week, but I still don't think they'll go for another general election with him. So I think a lot of those Tories are thinking, well, I'm no fan of this bunch, but get someone decent in charge, and they'll all have their own view as to what they consider is decent, and they'll go back to the Tories. Because for a lot of Conservatives, they want a Conservative government. They might not want this Conservative government, but they want a Conservative government rather than a Labour government. I think similarly, there will be Conservatives who are thinking, well, if they get rid of Boris, damn them. I don't want to be part of the Conservatives. And I think a lot of those people will be those 2019 Labour Tory switchers. So particularly in those red wall seats in the North of England, that switched between Labour and the Conservatives, that we know have those sort of red-blue switchers who voted Conservative in 29 purely because of Brexit and Boris getting Brexit done. And I suspect that if you talk to those people, a lot of them are still reasonably okay with Boris, reasonably defensive of him. Well, he's doing a good job. Didn't we all have a drink during lockdown? No one stuck to the rules 100%, because they're not Conservatives per se. They're just people who voted Conservative in 2019. And I think if Boris goes, a lot of those will go back to Labour, particularly if the next Conservative Prime Minister is someone more, properly Tory. But either way, there is an opportunity for us, because there are swathes of Conservative voters who would never vote Labour. They just won't. And that's where our skills really lie. That's what we saw in Cheshire and Amersham and in North Shropshire was, people think it's all about creating a progressive alliance of the left vote. It's not. There are not enough left-leaning voters in some of these seats to win them. You have to win the Tory vote. You have to switch those Tories. That's what we're good at.
Right. So I'm interrupting you. We've just had Sue Gray's report come out. So I'm going to give you guys a live reaction to see what you think. Obviously, it's fairly redacted, but I want to read you some of the points that are just being drip-fed to me. So Sue Gray has said there's been a failure of leadership and judgment by different parts of Number 10 and the Cabinet Office. Obviously, questions about excessive alcohol consumption there as well. Some of the events should not have taken place or developed the way they did, and that the lockdown gatherings are difficult to justify. Boris has now confirmed he will do a Commons statement at 3:30. Now, I don't think that will be resignation. Let me just see what else was coming. And then I'll get you guys to do a kind of, as soon as I've read these out, you can come in. One of the points is at least some of the gatherings in question represent serious failure to observe not just the high standards expected of those working at the heart of government, but also the standards expected of the entire population at that time. Richard, do you want to come in while I read a bit more about what you're hearing?
Yeah, what I'm hearing is very much what Hannah was talking about before, that we have a Prime Minister who works outside the norms of any Prime Minister that I've ever known of any party, and outside the norms of most of the Prime Ministers of any country that I've been involved in. It's Trump-like. They don't accept the truth, but here we have a senior civil servant saying things were badly wrong at Number 10. Who is in charge at the end of the day at Number 10? It's the Prime Minister. What should now happen? The Prime Minister should resign. And if he doesn't, it would be an absolute disgrace and a stain on the Mother of Parliaments, as we like to call it.
Hannah, I'm just going to read one more of the points that have been raised, and I'll let you come in again. So point 4 of what she raised is, and I wonder if this is where the Tories will put the focus as something which journalists have hinted at about a culture change. So not making it about the Prime Minister, making it about a whole rotten culture so he can get away with it. So point 4 is excessive consumption of alcohol is not appropriate in a professional workplace at any time. Steps must be taken to ensure that every government department has a clear and robust policy in place covering the consumption of alcohol in the workplace. Sorry, Hannah, you're muted.
So I just had a quick scan down it as well, John, while Richard was talking there. It's pretty soft, isn't it? It's pretty soft. I mean, it's saying that wrong has been done, but it's not exactly utterly scathing.
No.
It's pretty soft. And I'm concerned that absolutely nothing will come about this at all. I think it leaves them plenty of wriggle room. I think that point 4 there that you just read out about the alcohol, I think is concerning because it's concerning on two fronts, because it alludes to a much wider problem around drinking culture, but also that's a distraction actually from what I think most people consider to be the real matter at hand, which was that we were all following these guidelines, making compromises, missing out on, there's lots of jobs have a drinking culture, and they didn't do it for 18 months. And, never mind that, people didn't get to sit with their family members while they died. People didn't get to celebrate people's last birthdays, people's first birthdays.
It's the Queen sat alone.
Yeah. Sat alone. I read an awful story the other day about on the day of one of these parties, a chap sat in the car park of a hospital on his own while his wife had a miscarriage in the hospital on her own. That's what really matters to people. In the normal run of things, would people give a shit if number 10 staffers are getting boozed up after work every day? No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't, as long as they were doing their jobs. Who would really care? It's not right. It's not the right culture, but no one would really care. But over the last 18 months, to me, that's a distraction from the fact that these people have not just broken, but absolutely ridden roughshod over the rules, the guidelines, the laws that they themselves made. That's what rankles with people. And I think let's wait and see what happens at 3:30. But to me, that's soft, John. It's soft.
Well, like I said, we're getting this listeners and viewers as we are recording properly live. I feel like I'm on BBC News. We've got reports coming in. Okay, so we will continue with our topic, and anything else that comes up as we're talking away, we'll dip back into it. And actually, I might see what happens after Boris's speech at 3:30. I don't know if these two can come back on a little bit later for 10 minutes or something like that.
We might be back on at 4:00, man.
Yeah, we might be back on. Childcare and other issues provided. We might come in and do an extra bit on. But Hannah, some of the other stuff that's going on, we've talked about the polls and everything else. Let's talk about the huge issue with Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, again, I'm not sure. It's a very difficult one, this, because we often complain during the Blair years, being the America's poodles in terms of stuff. And, America's the policeman of the world, and it was almost seen as a bad thing. But when it comes to things like this, you kind of think, actually, we need America front and center in the world playing its part. But or am I wrong there? Is that, Hannah, what do you think about the whole thing?
We certainly don't need Trump's America, do we? I think the judgment remains out on whether we need Biden's America. We probably need Obama's America, but that one's long gone, isn't it? So I'm always fairly open about the fact that I don't make a habit of watching huge amounts of news because it's just bad for my mental health, really. And so I generally just let things wash over me. But actually, my daughter said to me at bedtime one day last week, "Mummy, are Russia going to start World War III?" So I don't know if she heard about that. I think
you want to keep her off the news, Alan.
Yeah, I thought she just watched Minecraft videos on YouTube, but maybe she's not. I think they do like a news roundup. And so I did have a look and I did have a bit of a chat. And the response I gave to her is that, Russia aren't really into world wars, are they? Russia aren't really after world domination. They just want to control their little patch. But is this highlighting how small we really are? We have, I don't really talk about Brexit either, but this is a safe space, isn't it? We've alienated our allies. The respective governments that we've had, so Trump and then subsequently Johnson here, I think has definitely had a negative impact on that relationship between the UK and the US, which, as I say, to some extent is not a bad thing, because he wanted to be associated with Trump's America, and the old Blair Bush years didn't work out particularly well in the end either, did they? So, but it's not about that close relationship. It's just about that mutual respect and cooperation, which I think has gone to some extent. I'm a team player. I'm always of the view that you're best in a team. And I think that this Great Britain and that America are more individualistic. And no one's going to take Russia on their own. No one is going to take Russia on their own. It would be foolish.
Richard, sorry. Good. Well, Richard, I was going to say, from your point of view, obviously, you were probably more active during the Cold War than me and Hannah. So, but, the global influence, obviously, China does it through economic kind of mercantilism, as in using the economic as a weapon of the state, almost. While Russia seems to just love anarchy, whether that's messing around with the Scottish independence referendum, messing around with Brexit, messing around with Trump's re-election. What are your feelings on this, about the Russia situation, where it leaves Britain and Europe, actually?
Well, I saw something that you think about if you see the map, but then forget how big the Ukraine is. It's as big as France and Germany put together. In fact, it's bigger than France and Germany put together. So you'd have to ask what 100,000 Russian troops could do there. It doesn't mean to say they couldn't cause trouble, but how much they could get into the country and how long they could stay there is, I think, a matter of debate. I think that they're going to, if they do anything, and I'm not convinced that they are, they will look very much at the eastern region, where they've already got the Crimea, where 13,500 people have died in that area with Russian separatists fighting. And this is a war that we don't know much about, because again, you're aware of it, you've heard Damansk, but you hadn't realized, certainly I hadn't, that 13,500 people had died there. So I think that if they do anything, they will consolidate in the east. They wouldn't be able to deal with the whole of Ukraine. But just coming back to the point that Hannah made there, we also have to query not only what is NATO like without the USA, we also have to query what is NATO like full stop. It's not a dynamic organization. In theory, it should have more troops, and I don't judge a country by the number of troops and bombs it's got. It should be bigger than the USA, but we know that many countries don't contribute to that, which was the only decent thing, in my view, that Trump said about NATO. We do, because we have these imperial aspirations, put in more than our fair share. Other people should come up to it. But we've also, I think, now got to reassess what NATO is about. Not to pull out, I'm a great believer in it, but it's not really showing its true worth at the moment, and should be far more decisive about issues like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to bring us back to the Sue Gray report just for a second. Ed Davey has now commented, just saying, this watered down update is utterly pointless. Everyone knows Boris Johnson broke the rules and lied to the country. It's time Conservative MPs did their patriotic duty, listened to their constituents, stood up for the decency by sacking Boris Johnson. He must go before he does any more harm. I don't think there's anything we can disagree with it.
We wouldn't dare disagree with our beloved leader.
And to be fair, though, can I just pick that up, John? I think Ed's been very strong on this, actually, over the last week. He made some comments on Twitter about, I'd need to find the exact tweet, but it was about the involvement of the Met Police in this matter. And I think he has been bang on, and he has been outspoken, he has been forthright, and in a way that Keir Starmer has not. Yeah. Keir Starmer has been softer again. Maybe just doesn't have quite that same voice. He's not really a kind of a one-line attack chap, is he? He's more of a sort of a reasoned argument kind of.
I've got another update. Sorry, I'm going to keep on doing this. So, according to the report, not only were the gatherings at 10 Downing Street, but actually there was a gathering in Boris Johnson's flat as well. The Downing Street flat has also been come out in this report. So the only idea, I mean, we all knew, he must have known. We're kind of living in a parallel universe where we think, well, we've got to give him benefit of the doubt. No, we bloody don't. I'm sorry. If there was X amount of parties happening on in my house, I don't care if I was upstairs or downstairs, I would know that was going on. But the report is now saying it happened actually in the resident's flat as well.
Yeah. Well, if there's a party going on in my house that I hadn't been invited to, I'd be most upset about that. But though that is possible, this has been a tissue of lies from not only, I might say, Boris Johnson, but also Rishi Sunak as well.
Yeah.
We should never forget that Rishi Sunak lives in number 10 Downing Street and Boris Johnson lives in number 11. Mm-hmm. They're both equally culpable. And the idea that Rishi Sunak is now getting ready to run a campaign, he's as guilty in every single way as Boris Johnson is. Ed Davey is right. If I did disagree with him, I would say so. I don't. Boris Johnson must go. It's our job, where we have Tory MPs and generally in the media, to push for that. Let's get on with it. Let's have either a general election or a new leader for the country.
Let's not have a general election. Let's not do that. Let's not do that in the run-up to the locals, eh? Some of us got council seats up.
Yeah. Hannah's up this year.
I don't.
Labour, Tory surge, heavens above. I do think, though, Richard is absolutely right. There are further questions to be asked there about who else was at these gatherings, as Sue Gray very softly calls them. Rishi lives right next door. And do we really believe that number 10 of the end of the workday evening is just, a few staff and Boris and Carrie? I don't think so. Which of the ministers were at those parties? Because frankly, they need ruling right out. Can you imagine a situation where we have a Tory leadership contest, they get a new Tory leader, whoever it might be, and then someone finds a revelation that new Prime Minister was at these parties?
Mm-hmm. Well, you saw with the investigations, how many people did they get to investigate it? I went, oh, yeah, we'll get such and such to investigate. Oh, no, he might have been at one. It kept happening. But it's interesting regarding Boris Johnson's future. And I mean, I think some people thought, right, he's toast. He must be gone. And actually, I thought when the parties before Prince Philip's funeral, the night before Prince Philip's funeral, I thought, right, that's it. You couldn't get a more thing that's going to enrage Tories more than having a party while the royal state funeral's about to happen. But I feel like none of the contenders are prepared to wield that knife. And I know the phrase, the person that wields a knife doesn't get to sit on the throne. But I just get the feeling, I think Rishi in particular has been felt, there's rumours that he's a bit lightweight in terms of the politics. And actually, you'd think he would be by far and away the most likely to do it. And it's interesting because leading from that, we're going to get onto this cost of living issue and the NI increase. The fact that this argument about whether that NI increase should go up or should happen or not, and the fact that there seems to be a lot of fighting there about how they can deal with this. I think that's interesting. It says in itself that nobody's ready to step in and really do that. But Richard, do you have any comments on the cost of living crisis? Obviously, I think we'd all agree here that no one thinks national insurance is, if you're going to deal with the problems with the NHS and social services, that NI increase is the way to do it. But, people are going to be really badly hit in this coming few months as these gas prices go up. What are your thoughts on, the Lib Dems have put forward things, but what are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is that NI is the wrong way to do it. If you're going to take it from ordinary people, you should do it through income tax, which is a fairer way of doing it. And you could also adjust the income tax bands so it is those with the broader shoulders that pay the most money. I firmly believe, though, that it isn't necessary to find the money from ordinary people to do this. Let's just take the big event in some ways of last week, the Tory minister storming out of the House of Lords, because the government are clearly not going to bother collecting £4.3 billion that's been misappropriated by fraud. Let's look at the way that the big so-called tech giants get away with big service charges in this country so they can declare their profit in Turks and Caicos and places like that. There are loads of ways that the government could raise money if they weren't in hock to their Tory mates who run those businesses and put some money back into the Tory coffers to keep them there, earning money on their behalf. So yes, taxes must go up. Yes, health and social services need paying for. Yes, we've got to do something to protect the cost of living for ordinary people. But the way to do that is to tax those who've got lots of money, who've made a fortune during the COVID pandemic and are continuing to make a fortune now.
Hannah?
Sorry, I just struggled with my mute button there. Yeah, I mean, it's just blow after blow, isn't it, for regular working class families at the moment. We know that the cost of living generally is spiraling. Fuel costs are massive. Food costs. I'm sure people have been following Jack Monroe's comments over recent weeks about how just those, the price of a bottle of champagne hasn't changed, but those, the basics, the value, tin tomatoes are going up 150, 200%. People's everyday essentials are going up. We've got this proposed national insurance hike, which again, we all agree isn't the right way to do it. Not Lib Dem policy. We've always been penny on every pound of income tax, ring fence for health and social care, which I think is a straightforward, fair, honest policy. And then certainly we're starting to look at the budget in Barnsley now. We've got full council this Thursday with the housing revenue account. That's a 4.1% increase in council rents. So these are, I know not everyone that lives in a council property is vulnerable, but if you look at that population, that's where more of the vulnerable residents are. That's where more of the deprivation is. And on top of all those cost of living hikes, we've now got Labour councils putting a 4.1% increase in their rent. And we are hugely expecting, as I'm sure most local authorities are expecting, also an increase in council tax at the budget next month. So, these little £150 grants that the council gave away over the winter, you might as well have not bothered. You're just completely wiping every penny of that out now. So it's a double whammy for people in this.
And let's not forget the universal credit uplift, which they redacted on. They took £80 away from people and then said, oh no, it'll be okay, we'll give you £20 of that £80 back. I'm dealing with people who that was the difference for them. That really was the difference in them actually being able to feed or heat their homes. And now you're getting all this on top. It is brutal, and places like the charity and third sector are going to be under a lot of pressure. Richard, you feel like you want to come back?
Well, for a Tory minister, 60 quid is the starters for him and his or her spouse at a posh restaurant in London. They have no idea that people will try and have to live for all their food on £60 a week. They have no comprehension about it. And even if you look at the intake of the so-called Red Wall Tories, they weren't people from the council estates. They weren't people who'd been brought up the hard way. They were people of some privilege who have no understanding, and they don't seem to have gained any understanding while they've been the MPs for those areas. So this puts the Tories in a bind. Are they going to protect rich people in the south or poor people in the north? They're going to protect rich people in the south. We think they can protect everyone by raising the money in an entirely different way. That's my rant for today. I fancy it.
No, that was very good. So with that, listeners and viewers, we're probably going to come to the end. As I say, we're getting drip feeds through of this Sue Gray report. There's reports here that, 14 out of the 16 events. So there were 16 events happened in Downing Street. And 14, it is believed, has met the bar for criminal investigation. So we don't know what's actually going to happen. Like I say, we're getting lots of reports and stuff. So as you know, as we're finishing recording this, Boris Johnson is due to come onto the air in 30 minutes' time. So I'm going to sign off this episode by saying thanking Richard and Hannah for being on. Thank you everyone for watching. You'll find out in a second, because we might come back on. If he just comes on TV, waffles a bit and throws in some Latin and doesn't actually do anything, I can't be asked giving him the airtime. So we will just leave that there for this episode, and we'll probably have another one later in the week. But if not, you'll see me in a second. We are back. We decided it was worth coming on and just seeing what Boris had said or not said. I hate life sometimes, but we've to help bring us up with joy is the new father. Hello, David. David Mackenzie has joined me, Hannah and Richard. Hello, David. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, John. How are you?
Well, all right. Frustrated. I think the language in our WhatsApp group we won't repeat on here, although it's very, very tempted. But Richard, you can go.
What about
first.
Gestures?
Yeah, gestures. So, Richard, your assessment of what's just happened in the House of Commons.
Well, two things. Firstly, the most effective intervention was probably the shortest, and that was Theresa May, the cold assassin with a killer stiletto, I think she was. I think he's done enough to get through in the short term. People saying, let's wait for the report, let's wait for the report. I didn't detect a big call for him to go now from the Tories. And of course, the worrying thing is that it'll be open. I'll produce the report in full. Then before I just turned off in disgust, he said, I'll decide what gets published. So he already contradicted himself in one speech. So I don't think it's the killer blow today. And I must say, for the country, that's bad. But for the Lib Dems, that's great. My assessment would be there are votes for us in Boris Johnson's premiership. But that's not the right thing for the country.
Yeah, okay. So we had, so what Richard's alluding to there, I suppose, I'll bring David in if that's okay, Hannah, then you can pick up after David, is that what we got is basically him saying, wait, just wait, kind of thing. He was asked repeatedly, including 3 times by Conservative MPs at the moment. It's still going on, so he might have done it even more times, but he's refused 3 times to publish the Sue Gray report in full, which means it's never, ever seeing the light of day. He will, because he said, he said basically he's in charge of what will get released about whether he broke rules. So that's never happening, is it, David?
No, he's made it quite clear that even when this report gets concluded, when the investigation gets concluded by the Met Police, that he will have no intention of releasing the report as, in full to the general public to view. And I think, again, we're seeing somebody who is just pushing the boundaries of confidence in the political institutions of our country. I had the opportunity to go out and speak to people campaigning at the weekend, and time again, what came up on the doorstep was, rage, just utter rage about how the Prime Minister has handled this. People, told me on a regular basis about deaths that they'd had in their family and been unable to see loved ones in the final moments of their life. And the Prime Minister's reaction to that is to sort of have a laugh and a joke, say he takes responsibility, but he doesn't, because he's not considering his own position. And I think it's damning. And in actuality, there's members of the opposite benches who should really be considering what they're going to do in the next 24 hours. And I'm thinking of people who were happy to cry and moan about things like Desmond Swayne on mask wearing. Where's Desmond Swayne now? What's he going to do about the the Prime Minister, and what are several other MPs who seem to be backing this Prime Minister despite repeated failings going to do about it?
Hannah, I'm really interested in your view because you've got elections this year, just like me. In fact, you're up this year. So is now the point where you say, okay, all talk, because you could see a split in the Tories. They were back him or not, or stay quiet, the vast majority. Do you think there's a point now where every Tory, the candidate who's going to take you on, every Tory in every council, in every part of this land should now say you're either with Boris Johnson or you're with the people of the UK, because you can't do both?
Yeah, I think, out of the House of Commons, I think we're certainly seeing that. There's only 3 Tory councillors in Barnsley, and they're all in the wards next door to mine, and they've all been saying for quite a while now, it's time for him to go. They've been sort of disassociating themselves from him for quite a while now, and I suspect they'll be fairly fluid on the doorsteps, defending him where it's needed and joining calls for him to go where that seems to be the mood. They're Tories of convenience, really, around here. But sorry, dog.
Excuse me.
Okay. No, but it's a key point that Hannah raises here. So the Tories and the leader of the Tories in Preston said, it's this when it all broke out, this doesn't look good. They've got to get a handle on things. They're not going to actually, that Tory, if she was to come out and say he should go, they're not prepared to do that. They're sitting on that fence. They're happy to take the Tory badge and get themselves elected in safe seats. But if they actually had any decency now, they have to say, no, he has to go.
To some extent, to some extent, I guess they can easily say it's not their battle. The biggest question is, for those of us that have got Tory MPs, or those of us, who live in authorities where, there are some new Tory MPs, which I think is probably all of us except for Richard.
Tory, hang on.
The question more is what are they going to do? And it's a particularly interesting question for the new blue red wall Tories, who were elected entirely on a Boris Johnson platform. They were elected on a Get Brexit Done platform, which was, entirely Boris driven. I said this in the earlier segment. A lot of these voters, they're not Tories, they're not Conservative. They're ex-Labour. They moved to UKIP. They moved to the Brexit Party. They voted Conservative to get Brexit done. And what judgment call are those MPs going to make? Because let's be honest, I don't think any of them have got any principles. The chap, I'm really bad with names. Defecting chap, John. Christian Wakeford, that's the one, who moved from the Conservatives to the Labour Party, I presume not out of some kind of ideological revelation, but simply in an attempt to save his seat at the next general election, because he has a mere 400 vote majority. So none of them have got any principles. What are they going to do? Which way are they going to put themselves? Because I think that they will be concerned that if they call for Boris's head, that's the end of their parliamentary careers.
Yeah. So Johnson isn't going. I think we're all in agreement. Let's do we can't do nod of the head, because obviously we do this as a podcast as well. Does anyone think Johnson is going to go before May?
No.
Okay. So that means and does anyone think we will ever see the Sue Gray report in full?
No.
No. Okay. Does anyone think the Met is going to find anything particularly egregious that will force Boris Johnson to go?
No.
I think there is a slight difference here, of course, that the Met won't issue a report to the Prime Minister. If they take action, they will take action, and it's a fixed penalty notice route at some level. So this is slightly different, and I think what Johnson was trying to deliberately confuse the two before. But your earlier point about the defector is that we have to think what we would do in case of defections, because there are some people we would want and some people we wouldn't want. So when I look back to the heady days, what was it, September, October 2019, we had some good people join us from both Labour and the Tory parties, including my own local MP, who I'd always got on very well. And she was on sort of the same political path as I was, but from different routes. I wouldn't have wanted the chap from Bury to join our party. So we'll have to consider carefully what would happen if some do choose to come over. Although, of course, the difference between joining us and the Labour Party, it's probably not a career-enhancing move.
But I suppose, all right, let's just work this out then. So we're only going to be here for a few minutes more. So what voters are now stemming? Actually, before I do that, I just want to say I thought Keir Starmer's speech was very good. Okay, I thought it was. Boris went on the blustery attack, and Keir didn't play that game. I think he was absolutely right. As Johnson did his usual nonsense about the medicines agencies and vaccine rollouts and anything else, they were absolutely on message to the Labour Party. Didn't deal with that. Just deal with him and his integrity. But going back to what Hannah said, and I'll come to you first, David, as a former Labour member as well, you might have things. So I'm not sure where the Tories' key demographic is. I'm not sure now, because I think the old school Tories would be find this pretty unedifying. And I don't know if it's the Johnsonian new Tory ex-UKIPers, which are probably the most likely to stay loyal and not go back.
Well, I think if anybody had the opportunity to catch the Andrew Neil Dispatches programme last night on Channel 4, there was some interesting revelations there that I think we're all probably aware of. He talked about the fact that actually there was a rebellion within what you would probably call the Johnsonian Tories, who were elected in the red wall seats, led by, apologies as Hannah said, I'm terrible with names, but the Ashfield MP, who was previously in the Labour Party, who very quickly found himself at the ire of the whips. And in actuality, what they found out was they were so new to Parliament that they didn't know the dark arts of what can happen to you when you step out of line. All of those individuals have actually now sort of gathered round the Prime Minister because of Christian's defection to the Labour Party. And in fact, Christian's probably sort of saved Boris Johnson, in some aspects by doing that. Yep. I can see the old guard of the Conservatives now really start to turn on Boris. David Davis already has openly. Andrew Mitchell obviously stood up and gave his points and was very scathing, saying that the Prime Minister no longer has his support. I think he will start to see more and more creep out. It comes to the point, but do they take action in terms of more letters to the 1922 committee, or what does that look like? And I think there's going to be people who will make judgments in the next, well, I would even say before the end of the day, and how that'll pan out over the next 24 hours will be very interesting.
I don't think any more letters are going in. Like I say, I think with Christian Wakeford, I was on county with. He was the chair of education scrutiny when I was with him at LCC. Not I wouldn't say he's a proper tub thumping Tory. And I think I think Hannah's right. The idea of a 400 majority going into the next election is probably what swayed him more than anything else. But I think that galvanised the Tories, and in some ways, as Richard alluded to right at the start, it's probably going to help the Lib Dems this May in terms of what we do. But let's very final points, okay? Because we have got elections in May and what this all means. And but okay, how does this affect the Lib Dem campaign in May? How does it affect Scotland? How does it affect Wales? I know that's a lot to take in, and we've already just assessed it. But we'll go back to David, then we'll go Hannah, and then last word with Richard.
Well, I think it plays out very well for us in terms of if this continues until May. I think, just any feedback that I've been getting from general voters is they're absolutely disgusted by this, and they intend to, vote with their feet in May and make their voice heard in terms of how much this has angered them. You are right. It'll be interesting to see how it really plays out in Scotland and in Wales. Obviously, it's a very different picture in Scotland because there's probably not as many Tories to really take the brunt of this.
They did well. 5 years ago in Scotland was a pretty high mark for the Tories. So that I imagine that's there's no surprise that the Tories in Scotland are just.
But I think what you've got to consider as well, though, is obviously Douglas Ross has taken the position to highly distance himself from Boris Johnson, and even Ruth Davidson, who is very friendly with Douglas Ross, has come out in a position of attacking the Prime Minister, despite the fact she accepted a peerage from him. So they are obviously going to try and position themselves as anti-Boris in an effort to save the majority of who they can skin. But remember, that that conversation has a different tilt, because it's not really going to be about Boris Johnson. It will be about SNP versus who's most likely to be the SNP. So I don't know if the Tories will really take as much of a kicking in Scotland as they might have done. I'll just very quickly touch on, I think Ian Blackford's performance in the Commons was just completely laughable. He made it all about himself rather than actually attacking the Prime Minister, which is usual from him.
Yeah, what a surprise.
In Wales, I wouldn't like to comment too much because I don't know the aspects of how it'll look going in May, but I definitely think, here in England, it's going to be devastating for the Tories if they keep them in power.
Hannah?
Yeah, I mean, it's really bad for the country, but electorally for us, to be honest, I think there isn't really any good situation for the Tories now going into the local elections, which perhaps just shows you the contempt in which the Conservatives hold local government and the local elections. Even if he were to resign today, which it's patent obviously is not going to, they would end up probably still trudging through a leadership contest in May. So yeah, I'm more than happy to have a Prime Minister and a government that is, electorally off-putting. Yeah, that's fine. Across, so as well as being a leader of the Lib Dems in Barnsley, I'm also the Yorkshire and Humber campaign committee chair. And, across Yorkshire and Humber last May, we saw, a really alarming rise in the Tory vote. In Barnsley, the Tories came close to beating Labour by pure accident in a number of seats, paper candidates, and it was entirely on Johnson and the vaccine bounce. And I dislike that because, number one, I dislike the fact that people can win seats without doing anything. And I want Barnsley Council to be us versus the Labour Party. We're the official opposition here. And the last thing I need is accidental Tories gaining seats. So I'm hoping to see that there's always a base vote. I'm hoping to see that come down. I don't think it will plummet, but I'm hoping it will come down, and that will be good for all of our elections across Yorkshire and the Humber, where, we lost some seats and definitely failed to make some gains last year. Hopefully it bodes better for us this time.
So Richard, you don't have to talk about Tories because you don't really have any in Liverpool, but let's round off this whole episode, plus the previous one as well. Your thoughts, what's happening next?
Well, there's an old saying by someone cleverer than me, there's a time and tide in the events of men. And it seems to me, as I go back through the years I've been involved, that after about 10, 12, 13 years of a government, it gets tired and people get tired of it. What Johnson needed was a huge, fresh, new approach, and probably with a fresh, new face for the Tories. What's going to happen now, in my view, is what happened in the last years of the Blair-Brown government, what happened in a way in the last years of the Thatcher government, although John Major came from absolutely nowhere, is that the council seats will drift away from them. At the start of the Labour, at the end of the Labour government, we were the second party in local government at the LGA. There are opportunities for us in local government this May, and as I don't have elections, I thought I might turn up in Preston to give a bit of a hand. Are you doing anything?
Are we doing anything? We're out every other day, man. Yeah, thank you very much.
Right, so I'll be out with you.
Only Preston, Richard. Do you not I'm always looking for a celebrity for my action days. Always.
Yeah, well, I'm very careful not to cross the border onto the dark side of the Pennines, you see. But no, I'm encouraging all my colleagues to come out wherever there's no election this year. We should be out where there is, particularly in Tory-facing seats. Yeah. We'll be there, and I urge every Lib Dem to follow Preston's example and to follow Barnsley's example, out on the doorstep, out on the door knocker, get the leaflets through the doors. This could be our big comeback year.
God, I've missed you, Richard. I just want to say that. But anyway, with that, podcast listeners and watchers, thank you so much. This is probably, because we've combined two, it's probably quite a long one. So congratulations if you've made it to this point. As Hannah yawns, absolutely on cue. But thank you so much to Richard, Hannah, and for David for his super sub appearance there at the end. We'll be back with more episodes because we're going to try and do these more regularly because, like I said, there's not going to be a Sue Gray report coming out now. So we're going to try and get lots of updates coming at you. We're going to have lots of more interviews with target candidates. You know, we've got those people that are going to win the next general election who are going to make that big difference. Go watch them, go see if you can help them, go see if you can do something to get them over the line whenever that happens. So thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.